the transcendental qualities of the Lord. The capacity for working with one's hand can be successful only when one engages himself in the service of the Lord with those hands. Similarly, one's mind can be pacified only when he simply thinks of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. This does not mean that one has to be very thoughtful, but one simply has to understand that Krishna, the absolute truth, is all pervasive by his localized aspect as Paramatma. If only one can think that Krishna as Paramatma is everywhere, even within the atom, then one can perfect the thinking, feeling, and willing function of his mind. The perfect devotee does not see the material world as it appears to the material eyes, but he sees everywhere the presence of his worshipable Lord to his Paramatma future. So that's where we stop. So Maharaj Pariksit continued to say that the function of the ear can be perfected simply by engagement in hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. He said further that the function of the head can be fully utilized when the head is engaged in bowing down before the Lord and his representative. That the Lord is represented in everyone's heart is a fact, and therefore the highly advanced devotee offers his respect to every living entity, considering that the body is the temple of the Lord. But it is not possible for all men to come to the stage of life immediately, because that stage is for the first-class devotee. The second-class devotee can consider the Vaishnavas, or the devotees of the Lord, to be representative of Krishna. And the devotee who is just beginning, the neophyte or third-class devotee, can bow his head before the deity in the temple and before the spiritual master, who is the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the neophyte stage, in the intermediate stage, or in the fully advanced perfected stage, one can make the function of the head perfect by bowing down before the Lord or his representative. Similarly, he can perfect the function of the eyes by seeing the Lord and his representative. In this way, everyone can elevate the function of the different part of his body to the highest perfectional stage, simply by engaging them in the service of the Lord or his representative. If one is able to do nothing more, he can simply bow down before the Lord and his representative and drink the Charanamrita, the water which has washed the lotus feet of the Lord or his devotee. On hearing these statements of Maharaja Pariksit, Shukdev Goswami became overwhelmed with devotional ecstasy. Because of King Parikshit's advanced understanding of the Vaishnava philosophy, Shukdev Goswami was already engaged in describing the activities of the Lord. And when he was asked by Maharaj Parikshit to describe them further, he continued with great pleasure to narrate Srimad Bhagavatam. So there was a very nice Brahmana, friend of Lord Sri Krishna. As a perfect Brahmana, he was very elevated in transcendental knowledge. And because of his advanced knowledge, he was not at all attached to material enjoyment. Therefore, he was very peaceful and had achieved supreme control over his senses. This means that the Brahmana was a perfect devotee because unless one is a perfect devotee, he cannot achieve the highest standard of knowledge. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that a person who has come to the point of perfection of knowledge surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, any person who has surrendered his life for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has come to the point of perfect knowledge. The result of perfect knowledge is that one becomes detached from the materialistic way of life. This detachment means complete control of the senses, which are always attracted by the material enjoyment. The senses of the devotee become purified, and in that stage, the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the complete field of devotional service. Although the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna was a householder, he was not busy accumulating wealth for very comfortable living. Therefore, he was satisfied by the income which automatically came to him according to his destiny. This is the sign of a perfect knowledge. A man who is in perfect knowledge knows that one cannot be happier than he is destined to be. In this material world, everyone is destined to suffer a certain amount of distress and to enjoy a certain amount of happiness. The amount of happiness and distress is already predestined for every living entity. No one can increase or decrease the happiness of the materialistic way of life. The Brahmana, therefore, did not exert himself for more material happiness, but he used his time for advancement of Krishna consciousness. Externally, he appeared to be a very poor because he had no rich dress and could not provide a very rich dress for his wife. And because their material condition was not very opulent, they were not even eating sufficiently. And thus, both he and his wife appeared to be very thin. The wife was not very anxious for her personal comfort, but she felt very concerned for her husband, who was such a pious Brahmana. She was trembling due to her weak health, and although she didn't like to dictate to her husband, she spoke as follows. Haribol. Quote, "My dear Lord, I know that Lord Krishna, who is the husband of the goddess of fortune, is your personal friend. You are also a devotee of Lord Krishna, and he is always ready to help his devotee. Even if you think that you are not rendering any devotional service to the Lord, still you are surrendered to him, and the Lord is protector of the surrendered soul. Moreover, I know that Lord Krishna is the ideal personality of Vedic culture. He is always in favor of Brahmanical culture and is very kind to the qualified Brahmanas. You are the most fortunate person because you have as your friend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the only shelter for personality like you because you are fully surrendered unto him. You are saintly, learned, and fully in control of your senses. Under the circumstances, Lord Krishna is your only shelter. Please, therefore, go to him. I'm sure that he will immediately understand your impoverished position. You are also a householder. Therefore, without any money, you are in a distressed condition. But as soon as he understands your position, he will certainly give you sufficient riches so that you can live very comfortably. Lord Krishna is now the king of the Bhoja, Vrishni, and Andhaka dynasties. And I have heard that he never leaves his capital city Dwarka. He is living there without outside engagements. He is so kind and liberated that he immediately gives everything, even his personal self, to any person who surrenders unto him. When he is prepared to give himself personally to his devotee, then there is nothing wonderful in giving some material riches. Of course, he does not give much material wealth to his devotees if the devotee is not very fixed. But I think in your case, he knows perfectly well how much you are fixed in devotional service. Therefore, he will not hesitate to award you some material benefit for the bare necessities of life. Unquote. In this way, the wife of the Brahmana again and again requested, in great humility and submission, that he go to Lord Sri Krishna. The Brahmana thought that there was no need to ask any material benefit from Lord Sri Krishna. But he was induced by the repeated request of his wife. Moreover, he thought, quote, if I go there, I shall be able to see the Lord personally. That will be a great opportunity. Even if I don't ask any material benefit from him, unquote. When he had decided to go to Krishna, he asked his wife if she had anything in the home that he could offer to Krishna, because he must take some presentation for his friend. The wife immediately collected 4 poundful of cheap rice from her neighboring friends and tied it in a small cloth like a handkerchief and gave it to her husband to present to Krishna. Without waiting any longer, the Brahmana took the presentation and began to proceed toward Dwarka to see his Lord. While he was proceeding toward Dwarka, he was absorbed in the thought of how he could be able to see Lord Krishna. He had no thought within his heart other than Krishna. This is also the same mood he is exhibiting as the Brajvasis, that they always anticipate before they meet, then they dwell while they are with Krishna, and when they leave, they will repeat to all other people what it transpired to have a time with Krishna. This is how they remain always absorbed in the thought of Krishna. That is the goal of our life. It was, of course, very difficult to reach the palaces of the king of the Yadu dynasty, but Brahmanas were allowed to visit. And when the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna went there, he, along with other Brahmanas, had to pass through 3 military encampments. In each camp, there were very big gates, and he also had to pass through them. After the gates and the camps, there were 16,000 big palaces. The Brahmana entered one palace which was very gorgeously decorated. When he entered this beautiful palace, he felt that he was swimming in the ocean of transcendental pleasure. He felt himself constantly diving and surfacing in that transcendental ocean. At that time, Lord Krishna was sitting on the bedstead of Queen Rukmini. Even from a considerable distance, he could see the Brahmana coming to his home, and he could recognize him as his friend. Lord Krishna immediately left his seat and came forward to receive his Brahmana friend. And upon reaching him, embraced the Brahmana with his two arms. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure, and yet he himself felt great pleasure upon embracing the poor Brahmana. Why? Because he was meeting his very dear friend. Lord Krishna has him seated on his own bedstead and personally brought him all kind of fruits and drinks to offer him, as is a proper in receiving a worshipable guest. Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme pure, but because he was playing the role of an ordinary human being, he immediately washed the Brahmana's feet and for his own purification sprinkled the water onto his head. After this, the Lord smeared the body of the Brahmana with the different kind of scented pulp, such as sandalwood, aguru, and saffron. He immediately burned several kind of scented incense, and as is usual, he offered him artik with burning lamps. After thus offering him an adequate welcome, and after the Brahmana had taken food and drink, Lord Krishna said, quote, "My dear friend, it is a great fortune that you have come here." Unquote. The Brahmana, being very poor, was not dressed nicely. His clothing was torn and dirty, and his body was also very lean and thin. He appeared not to be very clean, and because of his weak body, his bones were distinctly visible. The goddess of fortune, Rukmini Devi, personally began to fan him with the chamra fan. But the other women in the palace became astonished at Lord Krishna's behavior in receiving the Brahmana in that way. They were surprised to see how eager Lord Krishna was to welcome this particular Brahmana. They began to wonder how Lord Krishna could personally receive a Brahmana who was poor, not very neat or clean, and poorly dressed. But at the same time, they could realize that the Brahmana was not an ordinary living being. They knew that he must have performed great past activities. Otherwise, why was Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, taking so much care for him? They were still more surprised to see that the Brahmana was seated on the bedside of Lord Krishna. They were especially surprised to see that Lord Krishna had embraced him, exactly as he embraced his elder brother Balramji. Because Lord Krishna used to embrace only Rukmini or Balram and no one else. So after receiving the Brahmana nicely and sitting him on his own cushioned bed, Lord Krishna spoke to Brahmana as follows. Quote, "My dear Brahmana friend, you are a most intelligent personality. And you know very well the principle of religious life. I believe that after you finish your education at the house of our teacher, and after you sufficiently remunerated him, you must have gone back to your home and accepted a suitable wife. I know very well that from the beginning you were not at all attached to the materialistic way of life, nor did you desire to be very opulent materially, and therefore you are in need of money. In this material world, persons who are not attached to material opulences are very rarely found. Such unalloyed persons haven't the least desire to accumulate wealth and prosperity for sense gratification. But sometimes they are found to collect money just to exhibit the exemplary life of a householder. They show how by proper distribution of wealth one can become an ideal householder and at the same time become a great devotee. Such ideal householders are to be considered followers of my footsteps. I hope, my dear Brahmana friend, you remember all those days of our school life when both you and I were living together at the boarding house. Actually, whatever knowledge both you and I received in our life was accumulated in our student life. Quote, if a man is sufficiently educated in student life under the guidance of a proper teacher, then his life becomes successful in the future. He can very easily cross over the ocean of nations, and he is not subjected to the influence of illusory energy. My dear friend, everyone should consider his father to be his first teacher, because by mercy of one's father one gets this body. The father is therefore the natural spiritual master. Our text Our next spiritual master is he who initiates us into transcendental knowledge, and he is to be worshipped as much as I am. The spiritual master may be more than one. The spiritual master who instructs the disciple about spiritual matter is called Siksha Guru, and the spiritual master who initiates the disciple is called Diksha Guru. Both of them are my representatives. There may be many spiritual masters who instruct, but the initiator spiritual master is one. A human being who takes advantage of these spiritual masters and receiving proper knowledge from them crosses the ocean of material existence. He is to be understood as having properly utilized his human form of life. He has practical knowledge that the ultimate interest of life, which is to be gained only in this human form, is to achieve spiritual perfection and thus be transferred back home, back to Godhead. Continue, my dear friend, I'm a Paramatma, the super soul present in everyone's heart. And it is my direct order that human society must follow the principle of Varna and Ashram. As I have stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the human society should be divided according to quality and action into 4 Varnas. Similarly, everyone should divide his life into 4 parts. One should utilize the first part of the life in becoming a bona fide student, receiving adequate knowledge and keeping oneself in the vow of brahmacharya, so that one may completely devote his life for the service of the Supreme Master without indulging in sense gratification. A brahmachari is meant to lead a life of austerities and penances. The householder is meant to live a regulated life of sense gratification, but no one should remain a householder for the third stage of life. In that stage, one has to return to the austerities and penances formally practiced in brahmachari life, and thus relieve himself of the attachment to household life. After being relieved of his attachments to the materialistic way of life, one may accept the order of sannyas. What time is it? 6:50. Okay. He continued, as a super soul of the living entities sitting in everyone's heart, I observe everyone's activity in every stage and order of life, regardless of which stage one is in. When I see that one is engaged seriously and sincerely in discharging the duties ordered by the spiritual master and is thus dedicating his life to the service of the spiritual master, that person becomes most dear to me. As far as the life of brahmacharya is concerned, if one can continue the life of a brahmachari under the direction of a spiritual master, that is extremely good. But if in brahmachari life one feels sex impulses, then he should take leave of his spiritual master, satisfying him according to the Guru's desire. According to the Vedic system, a gift or difference to the spiritual master, which is called Guru Dakshina, then the disciple should take to householder life and accept a wife according to the religious rites. These instructions given by Lord Krishna while talking with his friend, the learned Brahmana, are very good for the guidance of human society. A system of human civilization that does not promote Varna and Ashram is nothing but polished animal society. Indulgence in sex life by a man or woman living single is never acceptable in human society. A man should either strictly follow the principle of the brahmachari life or with the permission of the spiritual master should get married. Single life with illicit sex is animal life. For the animal, there is no marriage institution. Modern society does not aim at fulfilling the mission of human life. The mission of the human life is to go back home, back to Godhead. To fulfill this mission, the system of Varna and Ashram must be followed. While the system is followed rigidly and continuously, it fulfills this mission of life. When it is followed indirectly, without guidance of superior order, then it simply creates a disturbing condition in the human society, and there is no peace and prosperity. So I think we should stop here. It's 6:54. We should be punctual in our worship service. So we stop here, and we appreciate the presence of all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavi who take austerity to join every morning to give their kind association. So I'd like to offer my humble obeisances at the desk of these wonderful Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who take austerity to join every morning from Houston, from Fresno, New Hampshire, Aurora, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Boston, Boise, Atlanta, Phoenix, Tempe, Austin, College Station, San Jose, Portland, Dallas, Detroit, Chicago, Naperville, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Baltimore, Baton Rouge, Alachua, Orlando, Sanford, Jacksonville, Ohio, St. Louis, Loganville, Georgia, Maine, Ottawa, Toronto, New Delhi, Pondicherry, Bangalore, and Pickering. Vanchakalpatarubhasya kripa sindhubhaya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So thank you very much. So as normal, we will start until 8 o'clock. I will chant continuously, but after 7:30, anybody who has not yet chanted, they give the first preference to unmute their phone and chant one round.